for Clemson Sports Talk with Lawton Swan.
Ready, set!
Just call me Swanny.
Tiger style. Tiger style.
Finally, Clemson Sports Talk has come back to Drive Time. Hello, everybody. Lawton Swan back in the saddle. Once again, it is the show that shakes the Southland. Clemson Sports Talk for you each and every afternoon as you make your way around the great state of South Carolina and beyond. Listening to us on incredible radio stations like Sports Radio, iHeart Radio application. Coming up at hour number 2, legendary Clemson SID joins the program, and recently we've been digging into the archives, cutting up some of the old ones for you. And, you know, recently up in Tigertown, Greg Buckner was celebrated to have his name and number put up in the rafters of Little John Coliseum. We actually sat down with Greg back in March of 2017 to talk about his life in basketball and much more. We'll dive into some of that interview here with you in the opening segment of the program. We'll have a lot of college football conversations, a lot of NIL talk today. And we'll also, again, get in with Tim Bourret about this Clemson Tiger men's basketball team this season and maybe even some of his other memories of great basketball players in Tigertown through the years. Here's how you can participate. 803-450-0086. That is the text line and the phone line. And without further ado, we head out to our interview we did with Greg Buckner back in March of 2017 on Clemson Sports Talk. Greg Buckner, former Clemson Tiger, joining the program here tonight on Clemson Sports Talk. Greg, thanks so much for carving out some time for us, man. Good to catch up with you.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure. Anything for Clemson people.
I heard that. Listen, I was thinking earlier today, I go back to our time in Tigertown, and you were a year ahead of me, and I started thinking over the 20-plus years since we've been out of there. I've got to admit, Greg, I think in that window, you've had by far the best career in the NBA of any former Clemson Tiger. How does that make you feel, kind of knowing that, not considering perhaps the legacy of Clemson by any means, but certainly your legacy and the job you did in the NBA?
Well, I mean, you got some guys that were ahead of me that I looked up to, the Dale Davis and the Eldon Campbells and guys like that. And now you got KJ McDaniels, who I coached in Houston, and you got Trevor Booker, who's like a little brother to me. Those guys are still carving out their way. And Chris Whitney is an older brother to me that we kind of grew up together and back in our hometown. So those guys had great careers too, and the two young guys that's there now. Just building that, toot my horn too much.
Greg Buckner here on Clemson Sports Talk. You can follow him on Twitter, by the way, at TheRealGBuck21. And Greg, I see that, you had your time bouncing around the NBA. You played for a number of teams. And I think most people probably still see you as a Dallas Maverick, I would assume. But nonetheless, you finished your coaching career so far up in Houston last season. What's the future hold for you? I mean, are you wanting to be a head coach at some point, collegiately, professionally? What's the news on that front?
Oh, absolutely. I meanybody that knows me knows what my dream job is, knows what I want to do. I want to build. I want to be the double Swanny of Clemson basketball. I want to bring a national championship to Clemson one day. Whether that happens, whatever. That's my job.
Hey, Greg, let us do this. Can we put you on hold and try to call you right back? We're having a little problem with the connection. I want to make sure we get a good, clean connection with you. I'm going to have my intern call you right back. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right, we're going to do that. We're going to see if we can get a better cell signal here with Greg Buckner. But, man, I like that. I mean, out of the gates, Greg Buckner here on Clemson Sports Talk says, I asked him, would you like to be a head coach? I don't know if y'all could hear him or not, but he said, look, he would like to bring a national championship to Clemson University as a head coach. That's got to be on Twitter at some point tonight, I believe. That's got to be on Twitter. Lowell, the intern, is going to try to get Greg Buckner back. We may have to push this interview over. That was I know it was a little garbled, but Greg Buckner said that his goal was to bring a national championship to Clemson University as a head coach. So I'm going to see if we can. I'm going to send him our number as well. I know we're having a little trouble with the phone lines, and I want to make sure we get that worked out. Lowell, I heard that right? Did I hear that correctly?
Well, we're talking about potential coaches for Clemson. Talking about the coaching search.
Right.
You got a guy who's willing to do it. He's been a coach in the NBA.
But I heard that right.
I
wasn't.
Believe so. I believe I heard that.
Have you seen
Have
you seen the movie Frequency, where the guy sort of, and there's a TV show now with Frequency, but the guy sort of gets on a bad line and tunes in, and he's talking to his dad way back in the day. I kind of feel like he said what I thought he said. So we're still having some trouble getting him. I gave him our number as well. And if we don't hear from Greg here in a second, we'll push this interview back over. But boy, that's breaking news. Greg Buckner saying, hey, he would like to bring a national championship to Clemson. He would like to bring a national championship to Clemson. So, wow, that's, I mean, what do you do there? I just want to ask you to clarify here. So I ask you what your future holds, and it sounded to me like you said you hope that you get to lead Clemson to a national championship someday.
That is what I said. Now, I'm not, politicking for nobody's job.
Right.
Coach Bromel's there already. I mean, I'm saying down the road, would love to have that opportunity to lead the Tigers to a Final Four and cut down the Nets one year. Yeah, absolutely.
Listen, check. Like I said when we hung up, I said, man, it checks all the boxes for me. I'm all about it. I think that I think that a former player, Greg, I'm going to be honest with you. I think that a former player and a guy who, now maybe some people who are younger than us don't know your story, but you originally committed to play for Rick Barnes when he was still at Providence, and then when he came to Clemson, you ended up coming in with him. So in some respects, you weren't necessarily, quote, I guess, recruited to Clemson, but you know what it takes to be in Clemson and to win at Clemson, because arguably you were part of some of the most successful teams that Clemson's ever had in terms of what they did in the regular season. And you got ripped off by a cheating Clem Haskins, but I won't go there. Anyway, I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, you're 100% right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, does being a former Clemson Tiger player give you some insight that maybe somebody else may not have if that job were to ever come open?
I think so. I mean, my blood, bleeds orange. That's all I think about in my man cave is all Clemson stuff. My kids are committed to going to Clemson. They know I'm not paying for school. But the one thing you got to be able to recruit. And I know what these young kids want. These young kids want opportunity to play in a up-style shooting three type tempo, get layups and dunks, and also they want to be ready to go to the pros. I mean, you get to the ACC. You think you're good enough to go into the NBA. I've been in the NBA the last 17 years, so I know what it takes to get to the NBA, and I think I got the charisma to go in these kids' homes and talk to these kids and let them know that Clemson would be just as great to them as it was to me, and they can have great success. And I'd love to lead those kids to that.
Greg, I think back, I can't watch probably the ACC tournament without thinking back to 1996 and you guys going up against North Carolina and your dunk with, 0.8 seconds, I think, remaining when Harold hit you with the ball in the lane. That moment for you when you come up. 0.6. Okay, 0.6. And you come up and you kind of give that number one and you're bouncing up the floor. Going back to that and being as young as you were, what was that moment like for you?
It was unbelievable. I mean, me and those guys, me, Terrell and Harold, E-Care, all of us, we're still close, very close. And I see Coach Scheid every game. He's here coaching with the Mavs. He's assistant coach on that team. And we always talk about that. That's something that they can never take away from us. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was the first team to beat North Carolina in the state of North Carolina. It was just an amazing feeling. I think we let our guard down after the next game. Clemson's one of those places, they always used to tell us, just win one game. We just want to get to one, be able to stay overnight at the ACC tournament. And we kind of let our guards down. And, unfortunately, we got beat the next game. I think by Tim Duncan's Wake Forest team. But that dunk was unbelievable. People still talk about that. And, I was at the national championship game, and people wanted to take my picture, wanted to tell their kids, well, I was there when Buck did this. And you don't know what you're missing. This guy's the greatest basketball player ever just because of the dunk. Obviously because there's been other great players who I feel that's better than me, but they think I was because of that one particular play. And it could have been any one of us because we all was very unselfish on that team.
Well, Buck, I go back and I think about your athleticism at that time and sort of the dynamics of what the guard / small forward has become, which was more the build that you had. And back then, I think it was maybe a little bit difficult for the coaching staff to decide, okay, where do we fit this kid in? Because you were all over the floor. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I remember you jumping center quite a bit at the beginning of ball games.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you're playing with Tom Wyman and Kerry Turbay, I mess with them all the time. They had no hops.
Yeah.
That was our 4 and 5 guy. And for a couple of years, I started at the small forward. So my senior year, I moved to the shooting guard. But I had the most hops. I mean, and if we want an opportunity to get the ball, I would be the guy to jump. And sometimes it would be Harold Jamison. But it was one of those things that in high school, I was very versatile. In college, I was very versatile. It didn't matter to me. I just wanted to be on the court. And Coach Barnes found ways to mismatch. They put a bigger guy on me. He would say, Buck, you go on the perimeter. They got one of those small guards on me, go to the post. Because in high school, I played the post. I played the 4 spot and, doing the games. But, street basketball, I was all over the place. So I was used to being all over the court.
Greg Buckner, former Clemson Tiger basketball legend here on Clemson Sports Talk tonight. And Greg, we mentioned your former head coach, Rick Barnes, earlier. What was it about the way you and Rick Barnes, in some respects, the way he came into the league and sort of set the world on fire with, getting into the arguments with Dean Smith and standing up for Clemson basketball like perhaps nobody had ever done? What was that like for you guys in the locker room to know that your coach had that kind of fire in his belly for what you guys were trying to do?
Oh, yeah, we've seen it every day. But the one thing about Coach, and I'm not sure if any other coaches that came before Coach, that he had North Carolina roots. So he understood what North Carolina would do to Clemson all through those years. He grew up watching that, and he understood that he had to take on Dean Smith to get for Clemson to get the respect. And we all had to understand that we got to follow him. He's a great leader. He's a fiery leader. If you can't be fiery, you can't play for him, because he was trying to do something that's really, really big, and that's come up there and knock off 2 of the Kings, Duke and Carolina. If you couldn't beat Duke and Carolina, you couldn't be champions, and he understood that he had to start at the top, and we loved it. I mean, what else to have a guy that's going to fight for you and willing to go at Dean Smith, because we all looked at Dean Smith as a god growing up in basketball, and he went straight at him, and we loved it, and we felt like we had to fight with him and be behind him and support whatever he did, because we felt that was right.
Greg Buckner joining us here on Clemson Sports Talk. And Greg, I think back to the year that you guys made a run to number 2 in the country. We mentioned it earlier, and you get beat in the Sweet 16 and double overtime. And I know that was a painful loss, but thinking back to that season and just how popular you guys were on campus, the football team was not what it is today. And as I've mentioned to Harold and Ikare in the past, I really thought that at that point, you guys were like the big men on campus. I mean, everybody wanted to be a part of that Clemson Tiger basketball experience. They wanted to be little John Looney's and root you guys on. What was that like for you walking around campus and kind of having that buzz about the basketball program?
Well, I mean, we knew nothing else but hard work. Put your lunch pail down and go ahead and go to work. Coach, he kind of groomed us for that, and we understood that the football it was a football school. Clemson's going to always be a football school unless somebody goes in there and wins 10 national championships on the basketball side. And even then, they may still be a football school. But we all understood that, and we didn't care. We loved those guys. We went to every football game too, and we wanted them to win every game. When they lost, we would be upset. Yeah. And the same way with them, when we lost, they would be upset. So it was, it's one of those like fraternities. I mean, when we came in as freshmen, we had to take those freshman orientation classes together, and we wouldn't see each other for the fall, and then we'd see each other around Christmas time, and everybody's put on 25 pounds, not just them, but us too. So the support was there, and a lot of times those football players were so athletic that people thought they was basketball players too, because unless they was a superstar. So, but it was a blast just being there and being a Clemson athlete, because everybody supported you regardless of how good or how bad you were doing. You still was a Tiger to them.
Greg, I want to take you back to that Slab 5 team, as you guys were called, back in 94 and 95 with the late Devin Gray, Rayfield Ragland, who's a good friend of mine, yourself, right, Merrill Coden, and Bill Harder. as good as that team was a couple of years later, how much does that group of individuals really stick with you in terms of what you guys were able to do, basically undermanned at every single position in the ACC?
Oh, it was crazy. I mean, the slot five, I wasn't even a part of the slot five. The slot five was Bill Harder, Merle Cole, Bruce Martin, Andy Kelly, and like you said, Rayfield Ragland. If you remember Devin, I mean, like you said, the late Devin Gray, he died of a heart attack, but he had a heart attack that spring before Coach Barnes got there. So he couldn't do anything. But those other five guys, I mean, Coach put it on them. He really, and he'll tell you today, he tried to run them off. So he put them through the ringer of conditioning and strength and just putting them through the test, extra work. And those guys really put the work in, laid the foundation and say, you got to be a worker or you're not going to make it. And so they pretty much put the fear of God basketball in our lives when we first got on campus. And it's like, look, don't be late because we all got to run. Don't mess up in class because we all got to run. And they're saying, man, you don't want to run because if Rick have to give us extra run, it's even worse. So, I mean, so they laid the foundation for those 4 years when I was there and when Rick was there to let everybody else who came in and say, look, you cannot mess up. And a couple of guys did mess up. And the one guy that would mess up on the most was Harold Jamison. He got to survive. But most of the guys that end up transferring, those were guys that messed up a lot, and they just couldn't handle the Coach Barnes way.
Greg, you mentioned before the break that you had several people down at the national championship game point you out to their kids, say, hey, I got to tell you about this guy and what he did. Talk about being down there in Tampa. I was there, Clemson bringing home the national championship. What was that like for you as a former athlete at Clemson?
It was a roller coaster. It really was. I mean, it was crazy to be up and down in Tampa to see that. I mean, the game was crazy. I saw so many people before the game that I hadn't seen in 15, 20 years. So it was an amazing time. I really enjoyed that time there. First time I'd ever been able to go to a bowl game because I was playing ball or working or doing something. I couldn't make it. And this year I was like, you know what? There's no way I'm not going to this national championship game if they make it.
I hear you. And of course, Deshaun Watson just seems to be such a different guy. If you were an NFL GM, would he be somebody that you would absolutely invest in?
It is crazy. Absolutely. I mean, I don't understand. And, I've read some places and it says he may be a second rounder. And I'm like, what are these people watching? I mean, he's one of those guys that just like turns and makes everybody around him better. He makes Dabo better. He makes those other guys better. He makes the whole entire football team better, the whole entire athletic program. He's just one of those guys that you would, beg and pray to be the face of your franchise. And, people don't believe him. Like Coach Dabo said, if they don't pick him, they're missing out one of the greatest. I think he's going to be a special quarterback in the NFL.
Let me ask you this. In your playing days in the NBA, you bounced around. You played with a lot of guys. Give me one guy. There may be more, but give me one that you played with in the NBA that you kind of had that same feeling about in terms of being a guy that you played beside.
Oh, man, that's tough. I mean, obviously I played with Dirk, who just passed his 30,000 points, sixth guy in the NBA history. We actually got drafted together, had first training camp together. Didn't think he was going to be this good. I thought he'd be a Hall of Famer, but I didn't think he was going to be the sixth highest scorer in NBA history. Played with Allen Iverson, who obviously was a great franchise player who took a bunch of Backstreet Boys to the championship against the Lakers and just met up with Shaq and Kobe. And then I played with Melo. Those three guys were pretty great who a franchise can lead on. Obviously, Allen Iverson and Carmelo haven't won a world championship, but those guys are pretty special when it comes to leading, putting guys on their back and making plays and making everybody else around them better.
So there you go. Just some highlights from that interview with Greg Buckner back in the day. 803-450-0086. That was from March 9th, 2017, as he joined us here on the program. Coming up in hour number 2, don't forget our good buddy, legendary Clemson SID Tim Bourret. We'll talk with him about his memories of Greg Buckner and also some of his memories of many, many years being not only on the call of Clemson Tiger basketball, but being there in Little John Coliseum for some very, very, I don't know if you'd call them life-changing moments, but some exciting moments, knocking off the number one team in the country, facing off against some of the best to ever play in the ACC, maybe even some of the best, a guy like Tim Duncan, ever play in the history of basketball. We'll dive into all that with Tim Bourret when we get back in hour number 2. Stay with us. It is the show that shakes the Southland. Clemson Sports Talk, Lawton Swan with you. Love that interview with Greg Buckner. And who knows? I mean, maybe one day, he'll get an opportunity to come back and coach at Clemson. And you could tell 5 years ago, he was excited about what could be just from that standpoint. I'm surprised, we talked about last week, or I guess maybe it was earlier this week, talked about the coaching situation at Duke with Mike Krzyzewski choosing John Shire over Tommy Amaker. And, if you listen to what I was talking with Greg Buckner about, it was really, for me, wondering about a former player and their relationship with the program, and whether or not that might be the magic elixir that could take a guy and maybe grow them into a head coach or, something like that. And Buckner last coached in the NBA as an assistant with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Also spent from 2017 to 2019 with the Memphis Grizzlies as an assistant coach. But it's not, to me, about whether or not he's even coached collegiately. It's about what his name would mean to be a part of the staff at Clemson. And ultimately, for Greg Buckner, it sounded like then there was really an excitement about, man, what it could mean to be able to be a coach at your alma mater. And I think that's what people want. They want somebody they feel like, and I can't remember if I said this to you guys on the radio or whether I said this to one of my family members when we were talking about the basketball team and how fans sort of feel about it. But I think what I said was, you want to know that the person coaching wants to win as badly as you do. And I think at times Brad Brownell, and I don't know if it's him personally or if it's just who he is or how he manages his feelings. I don't think people watch Clemson basketball. They see this team maybe have a bad performance or two, and they think to themselves, man, Coach Brownell seems as fired up about this as I am. And I think that's really what people desire. Like when Rick Barnes was in the league, he was just filled up with a whole bunch of I don't give a rip. And he didn't care if it was Coach K or Dean Smith or Gary Williams or whoever. He was going to get in somebody's face and let them know about it. And if that meant there was a technical foul, if that meant whatever, it was more about, you will respect us and we're going to pour it all out on the line. And I think that attitude is what you have to have if you're a program like Clemson, where you don't have real historical significance, where you're not going to bring in a ton of 5-star recruits that are just going to immediately change your program. You have to play and coach with a chip on your shoulder. And I got to tell you, I don't really feel that chip on Brad Brownell's shoulder that I think Clemson Tiger fans feel like should be permanently ingrained on a coach's shoulder in Tiger Town. It just, to me, if you lack that, then I think it makes it tough for fans to connect with you, because even though you've only been a part of the program for 10, 12 years, however many years total, the fans have had all of those losses that you racked up during your tenure and then some. And so I think that most people have more pain in their collective system of following Clemson basketball than any coach ever could. So you have to recognize that. You have to recognize that the fan base has felt hosed in big ball games against Duke and North Carolina through the years. And the fans want a coach who says, I'm not going to put up with that anymore. If that means I get a technical foul and I get thrown out of this game, that's fine. But we aren't going to be the team that gets bullied around simply because we don't have the pedigree that everybody else does. And that's honestly, that's what people that support Clemson basketball want. I've often said I felt like they needed a coach that could get them to the NCAA tournament, a coach that could obviously push them into the Sweet 16, et cetera, et cetera. But I think you can be an average coach, but with a different attitude and probably become a fan favorite, even if you don't have a ton of success early. Fans at Clemson just want to know that you are one of them, that you are their guy. And I think Brad Brownell would be well suited, given where Clemson is right now in the rankings in the Atlantic Coast Conference. He would be well suited, in my opinion, to be overly aggressive when it comes down to arguing, to be overly aggressive, maybe pick up a technical foul every once in a while. And while it may not be in your nature, when your back's against the wall, you got to do whatever you can to save yourself. And quite frankly, I get it. The X's and O's should be there for Brad Brownell. And then a lot of times they are. That play in the final moments of that Florida State game gave Clemson a good look at the basket. 3-pointer, albeit, but they only needed 2. But as much as the X's and O's are important at Clemson, I think technical fouls and getting thrown out and showing people that you want it as much or more than they do would keep fans in your corner, even if it was a down year, even if you were having a down career. They just want somebody out there fighting on the front lines for them. Rocking and rolling along on a Thursday afternoon. Tim Bourret coming up in just a little bit. So let me know, again, like I said before the break. I mean, I'm not, as I've said for a while, I'm not arguing for Brad Brownell to be fired. I'm not arguing for Brad Brownell to be kept at Clemson. I think he's had plenty of time. If they want to let him go, that's fine with me. I'm not going to come in here and cry on the radio and say, I can't believe they got rid of our leader. I would ask, in all honesty, though, to you, would a more fiery coach, given equal results to Brad Brownell's, be somebody that you would find easier to support and to continue to support? I mean, I think that's at least a decent question. Even if you don't want to make a change, or you're not sure if you want to make a change, or even if you do want to make a change, would a coach who just appeared, would the appearance be enough to keep you satisfied longer? I mean, I know it comes down to wins and losses, but if the guy was just out there scrappy and fighting for you, I think most people go, yeah, you know what? I'll stay with that guy. So that would be like my first thing. Like if Brad Brownell called me up and said, Swanny, what do I need to do to turn the momentum on the fan base? I'd say get kicked out of a couple of games. Like if you think the officiating was so bad at the end of that game, get thrown out. I know, but I don't want to cost us our game. Well, let me tell you, if you thought it was bad enough to bring it up the way Brad Brownell did at the press conference after the ball game, then maybe it was egregious enough that you should have gotten a little technical foul and had your piece out there in front of everybody. Let the fans know. Say, I've got your back. 803-450-0086. 803-450-0086. Boozer chiming in the program yesterday. Didn't get this one on the air. Apologize, Boozer. I was saying how I did not and have not been watching the Olympics, which weirdly made me want to watch the Olympics, but I didn't. I did not. But Boozer chimed in and says, we have been watching the Olympics. I like the snow sports and the sledding. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't watch it enough to even really know what all of the events are. Like, I know the downhill, slalom, and I know they've got like the big air jumps and stuff like that. And I did check out one thing. I will say this. I got on the VR headset, and they had some Olympic virtual reality. And that was kind of neat because you felt like you were actually standing right there and watching people, race past you, which that was, I can't lie to you, that was pretty cool. I don't get into the figure skating or all of that stuff, but I'll say this. Those folks are, I don't know if they're talented or just from another planet, but when they do the little pirouette, I guess you call it, it's just like spinning over and over and over on ice skates, and they're spinning so rapidly. I don't understand how they stay on their feet. Like, forget being on ice skates, forget being on the ice, and forget all the other jumps and moves that they do. But just, honestly, thinking about trying to spin as many times as those people spin and stay on your feet seems a bit absurd. 803-450-0086, text line, phone line. But Billy, he's checking into the Olympics. By the way, the overall medal count, Norway currently leading the way with 29 gold medals. Russia in second place with 26, and Germany checks in with 22. The USA was on the top list yesterday, but now has fallen off. And as you can imagine, the Olympic sports in America not nearly as supported as basketball, football, baseball, and really even hockey. I think also one more thing kind of on this front with the Olympics and trying to get more people motivated to watch it. I think the other thing that's kind of happened with the sport is because it's every 4 years. And yes, some people do multiple visits to the Olympics or whatever you call it. You don't have that relationship necessarily with some of these people that you might otherwise. And so that's why when you've got individuals out there who are able to stay in their prime peak physical condition for an extended period of time to be able to maintain their to maintain their edge and their crispness. I can't even say that word, crispness, in whatever sport they choose, I think fades away pretty quickly. If you're only invested in the Olympics, guys like Michael Phelps, who come along and swim in Olympic race on top of Olympic race on top of, or maybe it's not even Olympic race, Olympic year on top of Olympic year on top of Olympic year. To stay at that level and be successful at that level has got to be incredibly difficult. But there is no doubt that, the ones that can pull that off, like Michael Phelps and others, tend, because of how long they're around, to have this legacy that's tough to forget. Others, maybe not so much, especially if you're kind of a one and done, and I know Phelps is in the Summer Olympic Games, but if you're the guy that's supposed to be swimming the 400 meters or whatever in the Olympics and you only do it one time, unless the race is memorable, you probably aren't. You probably aren't. And I think that sort of built the disconnect for some people, because if every time you turn this on every 4 years, it's a brand new group of faces. I think humans enjoy continuity. I think they want things to stay the same. Humans don't necessarily embrace change. With a break, stick with us. Final segment of hour number 1 here on the show that shakes the Southland Clemson Sports Talk. Lawton Swan, thank you for being a part of the program. Hope you enjoyed that throwback interview with Greg Buckner, G-Buck, from his time in Tiger Town, and that was back in 2017. One of the things I love doing is digging into the archives, and of course, Greg was honored last weekend at Little John Coliseum, getting his name in the rafters. And you know, when the thing about Greg, when he was there competing at Clemson, undersized, but played big inside, lots of rebounds, lots of dunks, lots of, just a kind of a Swiss Army knife when it came down to what he brought you as a leader on the team. And if you take his frame, 6'6", small forward-ish, 2-guard-ish, if you take that and you look at this team right now, even if Hunter Tyson were healthy, you don't have that glue guy per se that makes everybody better. PJ Hall really playing well. 28 points. I mean, look, PJ Hall has proven to, I think, everybody he's going to be a legit player in the Atlantic Coast Conference over the next season or two if he decides to continue to play at Clemson for 2 more years. He's going to be a guy that I would imagine at some point, now I thought it was going to come the other night, he's going to crack 30, maybe 35 points in a game from the interior. And this isn't a game that's necessarily played back to the basket anymore. And so fundamentally, he's got a lot of tools in his tool belt. And he does a lot defensively. But when you think about teams that win a lot of games or have a lot of success in basketball, collegiately or elsewhere, a lot of times what you will find is that there's a guy who, he doesn't have to be the leading scorer every night. He doesn't have to get the most rebounds every game, but there will be a guy on that team who is a catalyst for everyone else to have better, more successful numbers. And Clemson basketball right now doesn't really have that. I'll tell you who I initially thought it was at the beginning of the year. I thought it was going to be David Collins. I thought David Collins was a facilitator for this team. But even Collins doesn't have the same frame and athleticism that you had from Greg Buckner during his time at Clemson. And so players like that who have that ability to do things like Trevor Booker did, run the floor, block shots, rebound, have assists, pass out of a double team. The glue guys are what truly helps a program like Clemson that's not going to recruit the top players in the country. Truly helps a program like Clemson to win some ball games that otherwise they can't win. And right now, I just don't know who that player is. And I certainly, look, Clyde Trapp transferred out of the program. I don't think he would have been that guy for Clemson. We mentioned Lynn Kidd the other day. He wouldn't have been that guy. He's a big man. He wouldn't have been the guy. John Newman III, I don't think would have been that guy. Maybe a little bit, but still not the frame that you got from, that bulky frame to rebound and do some things on the defensive end of the floor like Greg Buckner. And then Olivier Maxence Prosper. He might have been the if Olivier Maxence Prosper was putting up big numbers at Marquette this year, blocking shots, doing some things, rebounding, being a defensive stopper, clutch play, maybe scoring 10, 12 points for that team, I might be willing to lean in on him as somebody that could have fit that billing for Clemson. But he hasn't been that for Marquette. No reason to think he would have been that for Clemson. but they truly don't have it. It's not Hunter Tyson. It's not P.J. Hall. I mean, it's just not on the roster. 803-450-0086. 803-450-0086. Text line, phone line. Again, you can always be a part of the program anytime, any place, anywhere by checking out our website. Put the .com on it. Doggone it. That's ClemsonSportsTalk.com. And, of course, don't forget about all the excellent recruiting coverage that we've got for you, and we are trying to continually increase that. You can help us. Jump behind us, $63.17 for 1 year of coverage. That's 17 cents a day. If you think our show and website's worth it, man, we'd love to have you. And just trying to get the new interns in sync and lined up with everything. Speaking of interns, how about hearing old Lowell, the intern there? Lowell, the producer nowadays, but hearing Lowell, the intern's voice on the radio always takes me back to the days of doing our show there on Greystone Boulevard. And, of course, he's in the upstate right now working. But, man, wouldn't it be fun to get Lowell back for a while? Come hang out with us, Lowell. You're loyal Lowellists, as I call them. Those of you that are loyal to Lowell, you are a loyalist. Loyal. I can't even say it now. Thanks. A Lowellist. They always appreciated Lowell's takes here on the program. 803-450-0086. All right, coming up in hour number 2. You know it. Legendary Clemson SID Tim Bourret going to be joining us. And if you don't follow Tim on Twitter, you should, because there's always a nugget or two that will be delivered. And one of the things that came up this week was a throwback photo to a Clemson, Virginia basketball game very early on in Tim's career. And not only did it feature Tim Bourret in the photo, but also a tie to one former Clemson Tiger football player whose name shall remain unknown until we get back here on the program. But it's a guy currently playing in the NFL. So a lot of fun coming up here on the program as we throw it in the Wayback Machine with legendary Clemson SID Tim Bourret on the show that shakes the Southland. Keep it locked. Hour number 2 right around the bend, right here on Clemson Sports Talk. Stay with us.
It's time for Clemson Sports Talk with Lawton Swan.
Just call me Swanny.
Tiger style. Tiger style.
It is hour number 2. That's drive time right here on the show that shakes the Southland. Clemson Sports Talk. Lawton Swan with you again in hour number 1. We talked about Greg Buckner. We played some of his interview that we did with him back in March of 2017. And, of course, one of the guys that was there for those games, Tim Bourret. He joins us here on the program on a Thursday afternoon. Tim, welcome in. Certainly hope you're doing well.
Doing great, Lawton. How you doing?
I'll tell you, the weather, I like a couple of things. One, when I go out in the morning at 6:45, it's bright, and today it was warm. Those two things for me as a Southern guy, Tim, I love it. So bright in the morning and warm. I can handle it. All right, let's talk.
Yeah, we're hitting the late February, so we're getting into golf season.
Ooh, I like, the only golf I've done, I've got the Oculus Rift. I don't know if you know this thing. It's the virtual reality headset. And I've talked about this a couple of times on the program with some people when we mentioned golf. The golf on there, if you learn how to play, is incredibly realistic. I've got a buddy that's a really good golfer, low handicap. I'm actually going to take it over to his place here in the next couple of weeks and let him play a couple of rounds. But what I like is, man, you can play 9 holes in 35 minutes and not leave your house. The weather's always beautiful.
And you don't get tired.
No, you don't. You don't get tired. It's great. I'll tell you what. I'll bring it up to Clemson one day. We'll put you on the headset as well. Let you have a try.
Yeah,
at
I'd like
it,
to
but
try it. That sounds good.
it won't be long. Dabo will have 10 of these over at the athletic department. They'll be
That's
or
right.
at the Reef Center for the guys. All right, so let's talk real quick. I want to start with a photo, and one of the reasons I love following you on social media is because one, the incredible nuggets. Follow him right now on Twitter at Tim Bourret. But number two, every once in a while, a picture, a photo, a memory, or something will pop up, and you've always kind of got a story behind it. And there was a photo recently circulating. It was a 1981 matchup between Clemson and Virginia in Little John Coliseum, and there was a young, very young Tim Bourret, just 3 years into his tenure at the scorer's table. But most notably, you mentioned that Hunter Renfro's uncle was in the background of that photo. My question is, how did that connection get made back to his uncle at that time?
Well, actually, it was the 81-82 season, a game against Ralph Sampson in Virginia. This was Ralph's junior year, and the game was broadcast on NBC. The announcers were Marv Albert and Bucky Waters. You might remember when the games were on. It was a big region. It wasn't a national game, but it was a big region. And so I'm actually sitting across the court. It's not the scorer's table. It's actually on the other side of the court. In broadcasting the game, Jim Phillips was to my left, or to the right as you look at the picture. And but he was cropped out of the picture. So posted that, and it got sent around. And my buddy Al Adams noted that I was in the picture, and so I took a look at the picture, and then somebody else I wanted to identify the players, and then I noticed in the background was Hunter's uncle William Renfro, who actually was finishing up his academics. He had been a baseball manager under Coach Wilhelm, and I got to know him very well. I actually think the summer after his fourth year, and he had one more year to go, he actually lived with me in Clemson. He and Mike Brown, who was also on the baseball team. But yeah, he was. I noticed him in that picture. I guess I probably had gotten him a ticket. That's why he's sitting right behind me.
Wow, what a small world when you think about what Hunter's gone on to do. I know his father played sports over at Wofford, but I had no idea that he had an uncle who was actually at Clemson at one point, let alone an uncle that you knew during his time there. Tim Bourret, legendary Clemson SID, with us. So the only other glaring thing I noticed about that photo was the fact, Tim, that nobody's wearing Clemson gear. I didn't see a tiger paw. I didn't see an orange shirt. I remember the next time I will wear orange initiative that sort of came in somewhere in the 2000s, I guess, to really drive people to wear, Clemson gear to these games. That looked like everybody was going to church after the ball game, and it was in 1981. I mean, it's not like we're talking about this was a game from the 1950s.
Right. There were a lot of things Terry Don will be remembered for. Terry Don Phillips, obviously hiring Dabo Swanny, will be at the forefront, but he was the one who really started the wear orange on Friday, and then he had the signs up. I'll see him in the stadium next time. I'll wear orange, and he's really the one who got it. Got it going on a consistent basis. Now, ironically, you bring that up in 1980-81, the year before, we played a game on national television against South Carolina that I believe was on WTBS, believe it or not. They had a contract to do some games, and we promoted that as Orange Night. And so for that game, I do remember everybody wore, orange for that game, but it was like that was just, a single game promotion thing. When we played Duke in 79-80, the famous game when Duke was number one and we won in overtime 87-82, and there were 13,863 people in there. People were sitting in the aisles. I've got pictures of that game, and you're right. I mean, there's all kind of different colors. People didn't wear orange or purple or blue or whatever. They just all wore their own thing.
the closest thing I can remember to something that kind of caught my attention like that was, I believe it was Ron Franklin before Clemson and Florida State playing in Death Valley. They had pre-filmed maybe something while people were out tailgating, and they were where the West Zone is now, sort of overlooking towards the football practice fields. And there's not a tent in the park. Like, nobody had those pop-up tents. They just didn't exist. And people, I guess, just tailgated out there in the heat. And every time I see that, I think that was like 87. It's not like that was all that long ago either. But it's amazing how, and you've been right there, I mean, to see a game day for football morph the way it has during your time at Clemson. I mean, are you ever just awestruck at what it's kind of become?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, tailgating was what it said. You opened up your trunk and you had your stuff in the trunk, and that was it. There were no tents. And I mean, I guess people brought chairs to sit on because they were there for a while. But it's been within the last 20 years that tailgating has really, taken off. I mean, I remember going to games when I was in college, and people just tailgating was just that. You just had stuff in your trunk, and you just ate out of your trunk, and that was it.
It was a bucket of chicken from KFC and maybe some sweet tea, and that was about it. Now, I mean, some of these people, they might as well have a full rock concert out at their tailgates before these Clemson games and after the Clemson games. Again, legendary Clemson SID Tim Bourret with us here on the program. So, Tim, I want to check back into that 1981 photo that we were talking about a little bit ago. I didn't mean to segue off of that. You mentioned Jim Phillips, and you right there beside him. Were you doing the play-by-play then? And when was your first, or excuse me, the color commentary, or when was your first time, working with Jim Phillips in that capacity?
Yeah, I was. So it kind of happened gradually. So the 78-79 season, I did 2 games. I did the 2 games in the Sun Bowl Carnival that were played the same weekend that Clemson played Ohio State in the Gator Bowl. And so I got to do those games because Jerry Arp, who was the normal color commentator, home and away, he was also the promotions director. He wanted to go to that, to the bowl game and needed to go to the bowl game because there were a lot of things for him to do with Clemson alumni, et cetera. So that's how I got to do those first 2 games in the 79-80 season. I did all the games away from home. I was still the basketball SID, and so I had stuff I had to do for home games, oversee the stats crew, et cetera. But I got to do all the away games, which was great because I got to do the NCAA tournament. We got to the Elite 8 that year. And then the following year, 80-81, is when I started doing all the games home and away. And I've basically done all those games home and away since 1980-81.
I mean, that's incredible to think. Now, had you had experience in that capacity while you're at Notre Dame, while you're getting your degree? I mean, or is it like, all right, Tim, here we go, hot mic, everything's up, let's go?
I'd done a couple of games when I was a student at Notre Dame on the road. I'd sat in with, it's funny, Notre Dame and even into the 80s, didn't really have a strong radio network for basketball. And there were 2 stations in South Bend that actually did home and away, WSBT and WNDU. And so a couple of games my year I went to on the road during Christmas break, and I got to I sat in and did color with a guy named Sam Smith, who was with WSBT in South Bend. Went on to do some games for ESPN. Great guy. And so did a couple of games. I had to do a game in the Palestra against Villanova, I remember. And so I had a little bit of experience. So when they asked me about doing the games in the Sun Bowl, I I told him I had done a couple of games, and so it just picked up from there. But it didn't have a lot of experience. But obviously, I knew the Clemson team, so I was pretty confident in that regard.
Now, outside of the times when you were unable to maybe be on the call because of a conflict between sports or sporting events at Clemson, I mean, have you ever been out sick? Like, have you missed a game because you were sick or something like that? Like, I get it. The football team's in the bowl game, basketball team, so where you can't be at both. But when's the last time Tim Bourret I couldn't go. I couldn't make it.
Yes. So, I believe it's been 25 years since. I've missed, plenty of games for golf and worked in NBC golf and when there's a, conflict with football. But the last game I think I missed when I was sick was when Rick Barnes was here, and we were playing a game against South Carolina. And I think it was the 1995-96 season. And I really had the flu. I was in bed moaning sick.
Ugh.
And so I listened to the game on the radio, and Jim Phillips calling the game, and I can't remember who he had with him. But anyway, so the game ends, and about 15 minutes later, the phone rings, and I pick it up, and it's Coach Barnes, and I answered the phone, hello, and he says, I knew I couldn't depend on you to be here at all the games. It just gave me a hard time about missing the game because I was sick. But yeah, I certainly remember missing. I'm sure I missed some other games where I had a flu bug or whatever, but not too many. I know I never missed a home football game the whole time I was
Wow.
full time.
Well, and that's the other thing I've often wondered. I get it, like coaches, especially football, right? Like it's one day a week, it's a Saturday, but I've often wondered, when's the last time, say, a coach was so ill that they couldn't coach a ball game or whatever, because I feel like even if Dabo Swinney were a little under the weather, and I'm not talking COVID-19 stuff, I'm talking, pre-COVID when people didn't have to be gone. But, when's the last time a coach just couldn't be the coach on Saturday, maybe for Clemson? I mean, I have no idea.
You're right. It doesn't happen that often. Now, I've always personally been healthier. Is that the right way? In the fall, I rarely got sick. Like you said, way before COVID. Whether I guess it's the nature of the weather or whatever. It doesn't rain as much or whatever. But I cannot remember, right, as you throw that at me, pre-COVID of a Clemson head coach being sick for a football game. I never heard the coach Howard did. You bring that up. Cliff Ellis had a run of I think 1,394 consecutive games at Coastal Carolina before he missed one this year due to COVID, and even that I don't think he was that sick. He just happened to test positive, so he couldn't be at the game. But yeah, I can't remember a Clemson head football coach missing a game because of illness.
Yeah, it would be interesting to find out when that was, because again, prior to COVID, I mean, it was a different ball game, obviously, but yeah, I just I've never thought of one that skipped it. And hearing you talk about it and talking about your time there in Tiger Town and the run of consecutive games kind of makes you wonder. Again, legendary Clemson SID Tim Bourret hanging out with us. And Tim, you mentioned how long you've been around the program, and right now I know this basketball team's in a bit of a funk, but there's no doubt PJ Hall, I mean, he, the way he's playing right now, I think I said this to you a couple of weeks ago, he seems to be as skilled of a big man as we've seen in Clemson in a long time. 28 points in a losing effort, 81-80. Clemson falls at Florida State earlier this week. But my goodness, is that kid playing great, considering, and Brad Brunell pointed this out, he's doing it, basically after being in a boot for 90% of the week when it comes down to, the health of his foot.
Yeah, I mean, he still is all the time. You might have seen on Twitter where he stopped to let a sports writer charge his car,
right?
Because and in the picture the guy took of him, he's wearing that boot. After the after the game. So he puts it on. He's wearing it almost the whole time in between games. So it's it's been remarkable what he is able to accomplish. The 28-point performance. He's only the I think he's the third different Clemson center to score at least 28 points in a game in the last 30 years. Trevor Booker did it twice when Trevor Booker was the center in 06, 07, and 07 and 08, and then Raymond Sykes was the center after that. So he had two 30-point games when he was the center, and then Chris Hobbs had a 28-point game against Virginia. As good as Sharon Wright was, 25 was the most he ever got in a game. So you got to go all the way back to Larry Nance and Horace Grant to really get some other games where that was the case.
And what may be most impressive about what we see from PJ Hall right now is the fact that this is not necessarily a game anymore that's, driven by the big man in the middle. I mean, I know he's not strictly a back to the basket kind of guy. He's got a lot of moves. I mean, he had the one dribble drive to the basket with the dunk with the left hand and all that. But man, I mean, he's fun to watch, Tim, and your stories. I know I'm telling you, almost weekly, my dad texts me on Thursday after you go off the air, and he's like, man, I love those segments with Tim Bourret. So that's why I like digging into the archives to talk about some of the good old days for people out there.
Well, good. I enjoy being with you.
Tim, you have a wonderful week. Pull the Tigers through this weekend as they take on the Louisville Cardinals. And, man, what feels like a must-win game for this bunch right now. They just got to get off the schneid.
Yeah, it's a must-win for both teams, quite frankly. Louisville's lost 7 in a row. They have their longest losing streak since the 40-41 season.
Unbelievable. Tim, we'll talk to you next Thursday. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So there you go, Tim Bourret here on the program, 803-450-0086. We've got an update from the Clemson Tiger football team as one current Clemson football player's career apparently has come to a conclusion. We'll tell you what we know about that when we get back here on the show that shakes the Southland. 803-450-0086, 803-450-0086, text line, phone line. Again, be a part of the program anytime, any place, anywhere, and go follow us on Twitter at Clemson Sports. And our last guest there, Tim Bourret, he's at Tim Bourret. The show that shakes the Southland, Clemson Sports Talk, Lawton Swan with you on a Thursday afternoon. Feels like a Friday. I don't have the day job tomorrow. Got this job, but not the day job. Some news out of Tiger Town just a few minutes ago. I actually saw this while we were talking with Tim Bourret. Current Clemson offensive lineman Hunter Rayburn is done with football at Clemson due to a neck condition. That news coming out from Larry Williams. Ross Taylor has confirmed the situation, and it appears that Hunter Rayburn will transition to a role as a student assistant. You think back to, players in the past who have had issues. Noah DeHaan, the neck is not something to play with. And here is another player, Hunter Rayburn, who would have been a redshirt junior this season. Hunter Rayburn, who would have competed to be the starting center for certain, is now going to be stepping away from football. I think about the guys from Mike Williams to Justin Ross to Richard Jurgen, all these guys that have had some issues of some semblance with their neck. And the one thing I think we can all say for certain it is, while the decision is made today for Rayburn, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be always for Rayburn, but because I think, and again, I am not a doctor and I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, but I think sometimes being away from the sport, you can have your desires change. And I would imagine that if you continue to work out and get stronger, maybe some of the whatever's deteriorated or whatever's gone on, it could get better, and you could ultimately, maybe make a triumphant return. But at this point, it doesn't look like that'll be the case. The neck pain that he's been dealing with, I guess, too great. And so Hunter Rayburn, his career at Clemson comes to an end. He was in the 2019 class out of Pensacola, Florida, at Pensacola High School, 3-star prospect, offensive lineman, recruited to Clemson by Jeff Scott, and now he is going to hang it up, which I hate to hear, but as I said a few minutes ago, anytime you are dealing with a neck issue, discretion is the better part of valor. And while the stingers and the pain and the things that he has dealt with are bad today, who knows what that could mean for him in the future. When you're 20 versus when you're 70. And you have to think about the long-term ramifications. And I think this is part of the reason that Clemson has found, I talk about this quite a bit, has been able to excel when it comes down to recruiting, because if you can convince enough guys that you are about the whole student and not just a part of the student, the whole, then there is a belief that if things go the way that it went for a Hunter Rayburn, for me, then I can still be embraced by the team and have an opportunity to get into coaching, or even maybe have an opportunity down the road to do some other job because of all the programs that Clemson has put in place to make athletes or help athletes be more successful. And again, who knows if Hunter Rayburn ever plays another snap, not necessarily at Clemson, but anywhere. But at this point, it would appear that that's the direction he's going to be going, is to transition out of playing the game because of issues that he's got. And that's his right, 100%. 803-450-0086. How does that affect Clemson as it pertains to Clemson's offensive line? Well, first off, the line was going to be a key part of this class or this season, because if you think about the quarterback situation with DJ, with Cade Klubnik, with I almost said Hunter Johnson. Oh boy, I'm destined to do that. Hunter Johnson returning, along with the wide receivers, the bevy of wideouts we brought up yesterday. Additionally, the running back trio. Make no mistake about it, the skill positions are buttoned up. Tight end, keep your eyes there, and then that offensive line. And so if you look at the depth chart of what this could look like for Clemson, whether Hunter Rayburn was going to play center or guard, who knows? But it's a shot to the depth. I mean, it truly is a shot to the depth when it comes down to this group in 2021. And, I think that if there was going to be a question mark on the offensive side of the ball for most people, it was already going to be that offensive line. Key things here to see how it shakes up, I think, still. The development further of Marcus Tate. I think also the development of Ryan Linthicum. Mason Trotter has the ability to play guard if necessary. I know Dabo Swanny has talked about Dietrich Pennington. Pennington, again, probably trends more towards a tackle. But the more healthy bodies you can have, the better off you are. And there's some versatility, too, from a guy like Walker Parks. So, depending on how Tristan Lee develops this offseason, you've got these moving pieces available, and versatility is something we talk about quite a bit. And Rayburn was a versatile guy for Clemson. And now he'll be, I guess, technically even more versatile, as he'll take his talents to the sidelines as a student assistant. And we'll see where it goes from him. I'm glad and fortunate, for him that nothing's worse than what's going on, but hate to hear his career will come to an end at this point. Stay with us. It is the show that shakes the Southland Clemson Sports Talk. Lawton Swan with you on a Thursday afternoon. So Paul Feinbaum from the SEC Network put out a tweet earlier today that got me thinking. Because, again, look, Gamecock Nation, I'm here for you. I'm your guy. I'm your friendly Uncle Swanny. And I keep you updated on, how I think and feel about your program. And quite frankly, I like to believe that I give you the most honest assessment of your program. Actually, you know what? Scratch that and reverse it. Et cetera, et cetera. I do give you the best insight into your program because I give you the real talk. I give you facts. I don't set you up for false narratives and belief that just can't be real. I give you realistic expectations. So if your question is why, Swanny, why? Why do you give us realistic expectations? It's because much like I give Clemson fans my honest take, I'm going to give you my honest take because you deserve honesty. You deserve the truth. And here's the truth. Paul Feinbaum wanted to know if you are an SEC school, and if indeed when Texas and Oklahoma join, you go to a pod format, what teams do you want in a pod with your school? And so I think this begins the debate of how this would be lined up if they do it, right? Now, my hunch is you would keep together the teams from the old Big Eight, which would give you Texas, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and Arkansas. You would have those teams. Maybe that's the old Southwestern Conference, whatever it was back in the day. Right? Makes perfect sense. I don't think there's a lot of arguing on that front from people. Kind of the left coast of the SEC. Moving further towards the east, I think you would certainly pop in the LSU Tigers. I think you go with the Alabama Crimson Tide. I think you would go with Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Now you're saying, Swanny, I don't know about this. How can you not have Alabama and Auburn in the same pod? I think that's perfectly fine because of the way this setup would work. And so then what you would do is, in my opinion, you would put Auburn, but always have them match up against Alabama. You got to keep that rivalry cooking. You would put Auburn. Then you would put Georgia, because you got to have the Bulldogs in there. Then probably Missouri and Tennessee, which would leave for South Carolina a fairly favorable setup with Florida, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt. And I think from that scenario, you could still line up a lot of those traditional matchups. You could keep South Carolina and Georgia. I mean, the only thing that you would switch, I mean, if you were going to switch anything, might be, say, if you wanted to just force Vanderbilt and Tennessee together and flip-flop Missouri there and put Vandy with Auburn, Georgia, and Tennessee and put UK, South Carolina, Florida, and Mizzou. I'll say this, even in a tougher conference, unless they don't go with some sort of geographic pairings and like a traditional kind of matchup pairing, by taking those teams that used to play in the state of Texas and Oklahoma, essentially with Arkansas, and put them all together. if they don't do that, if it's not regionalized in that way, then it could go who knows where, and South Carolina could end up in a pod with Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. I mean, for all I know, if they don't do any thought process into it. I think if you put a little bit of thought into it, you'd wind up with something along those lines. And then I don't know if the SEC would ever expand to like a bigger playoff for the SEC championship. But if you're just thinking long term on that front, I mean, this would present where you could have, say, Oklahoma facing off against Florida and Alabama facing off against Georgia for the right to play in the SEC championship game. Maybe you get like a Florida-Alabama and Oklahoma-Georgia matchup. I mean, that's a little extreme, taking the winners of the pods or however you run it up to decide how you're going to do it. But the thing I can say is, I think for South Carolina's standpoint, unless pods happen and Carolina just gets railroaded, I think because it will spread the wealth a little bit, it will actually help South Carolina, because I don't see them landing in a division, given their geography, that would pin them behind, like right now and really throughout the entire time that South Carolina's been in the SEC, 9 times out of 10, they were like 3rd or 4th in the pecking order. I think in this scenario, they probably are competitive to be 2nd if you can end up with UK and Vandy in your pod, or even UK and Missouri. And for the Gamecocks to feel like they're just, right at the edge of being the top in their pod or quadrant or whatever, all to make you feel good, given the fact that it's been very rare that you've even been in the upper half of your division, because a lot of times it's Florida, it's Georgia, it's Tennessee, it's somebody else surprising you, like a Kentucky, I think the pod format's interesting. I can't wait to see what they come up with if that's the way they go, because I really do think that it really could change the way we think about conferences, which might be healthy, quite frankly. Final segment coming up next.
What have you done for me lately? It's a fair question. Just don't lose sight of the bigger picture. Don't forget history. Lucky for us at Clemson, the answer to the questions, what have you done for me lately, and what have you done always, are the same. We win.
Final segment on the Thursday afternoon. Got to shout out my buddy Mark for hitting us up. Let me know about Hunter Rayburn being done with football. Forgot to drop that earlier. Appreciate it, Mark. Let's see. Also, Adam, listening to the Super Bowl podcast, he says, Swanny, I was kind of disappointed we didn't get a Tupac hologram at halftime. I agree. I thought we would. We've already had a Tupac hologram before, like 5 or 10 years ago. Let's get another one. It's got to be better. Adam also says, tell Mason not to be too upset. The Bengals will be back. They need to get a better offensive line to protect Joe Burrow. That comes to us from Adam. Appreciate it, Adam. 803-450-0086. Again, that is the text line. That is the phone line. And yes, it is 24 hours a day, and it is 7 days a week. So continue to use that to be a part of the program. Again, the big news out of Clemson today, Hunter Rayburn's college football career comes to a conclusion. You hate to hear it. Neck issues, stingers, first reported by Larry Williams, verified by Ross Taylor, SID up at Clemson. And the only thing I hate is that it didn't come out where I could get to it while we were talking to Tim Bourret and get his reaction to it. So it'll be a week till we find out what Tim Bourret thinks about that story, unfortunately. But that's the way the cookie crumbles, I guess they would say. And I mean, literally in the midst of that conversation with Tim, that stuff comes out. So glad we could at least work it in for you here. 803-450-0086. Again, that is the text line and the phone line. Tell your friends and neighbors, man. I mentioned the podcast numbers. They are going up, and I'd love to see those numbers double by the end of next year. I'd love to see our viewership and subscriptions on YouTube double as well. I know we are not doing our live video the way we were previously. I mentioned that yesterday. Don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole with you on the show, but maybe I could go with what Terry Don Phillips would do. Next time I'll subscribe to the podcast. Maybe I'll get some shirts made up. Next time I'll subscribe to Clemson Sports Talk. Because I think a lot of people who listen to the show will tell you. I think a lot of people who listen to the show will tell you, man, I not only do I love talking about Clemson, I like to have a lot of fun. I hope you do too. OP91 chimes in. He says, Swanny, the issue with Coach Brownell has been the same over the years. A consistent inability to recruit at an Atlantic Coast Conference level. Even the transfers are not at the level we need. A change appears to be needed. Let me throw a scenario out real quick. Because I will say this. Like, I already threw out the hypothetical of, well, with the transfer portal being what it is and P.J. Hall being as good as he is, what would stop him from just hopping in the portal anyway and leaving Clemson this year? But hypothetically, given, in sports, we see athletes who have power, professional sports, athletes who have power to basically hire and fire a coach. If LeBron James wants to get a coach fired, he can. There have been thoughts about it even this year and conversations about it even this year. Should players have that power? That's not for me to decide. I know what most of you will say. Absolutely not. But could we be in a situation with the transfer portal and the open flowing movement of players? Could we be in a situation where collegiate athletes could dictate and determine whether a coach stays or not? And let me give you a scenario here. If P.J. Hall wanted either way, Brad Brownell to stay or go, and I think P.J. Hall wants Brad Brownell to stay. They got a good relationship. But if Clemson was thinking about getting rid of Brad Brownell and P.J. Hall wanted to keep him, there's no way you can keep P.J. Hall from leaving if you fire Brad Brownell. So Hall could say, and I'm not saying he would, but Hall could say, look, if you get rid of Brad Brownell, I'm portaling out of here. So if that were the scenario, I'm not saying it is, and it could be the opposite, right? It could be P.J. Hall could go to somebody above him and say, look, man, I like playing basketball here, but if y'all want to get rid of Brad Brownell, I'm portaling out of here, right? I mean, so the scenario could go either way. But my question is, if you knew that you were going to lose P.J. Hall, if Clemson didn't keep Brad Brownell, would your opinion on Brad Brownell change, given how good we mentioned that I think P.J. Hall is? For the first time ever, not only do players have some power over their image, their name, image, and likeness, but they kind of could have some power over what happens as far as the coaches go at these institutions. The future of college sports is getting wilder and wilder. That's one I'll just throw out there just for food for thought, food for fodder as we head into a Friday edition. We got to get out of here. As always, y'all take care now and go Tigers.